There is a Native American prayer that says, "O Great Spirit, keep me from ever judging a man until I have walked a mile in his moccasins." That's the exact lesson that Jane Elliott was going to teach her third grade class in the 60s, but it ended up being just a jumping off point for what became the greatest experience of their lives. I don't know if any of you have heard of A Class Divided, but it was the PBS special and the book that was written based on Jane Elliott's class exercise on discrimination. I watched the documentary not too long ago, and I felt personally affected and influenced by it, and I wasn't even a participant in the actual exercise, and I feel like anyone would be affected by watching it. Because discrimination is universal. Everyone has experienced some sort of discrimination, whether it was towards themselves or they saw somebody else being affected by it. So I think anyone would be influenced by this story. So today I want to familiarize you with the social experiment shown in A Class Divided that was created by Jane Elliott. I'm going to give you some background information on her as well as her experiment. I'll show you how it works. And I'd like to explain the positive effects that it has. So first, I want to give you some background information since I'm sure most of you are not familiar. That's Jane Elliott. The picture was taken in the 60s. She was raised in a white Christian American family in the Midwest. She was surrounded by a lot of racism, and so she became an anti-racism activist. And though she was only a third grade teacher, she had a lot of passion towards this subject. So, as I mentioned before about the Native American prayer, she was using that saying to teach her kids about brotherhood and to not discriminate against people who look differently than we do. And as time would have it, the night before her class, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. And so she took that and said, you know what, that's it. I need to show these kids, not just tell them why we shouldn't do this. And I have a quote from the book that she says, "What I had racked my brain to think of the night before was a way of letting my children find out for themselves personally and deeply what discrimination was really like." So now I'll talk to you about her experiment. It's called the Blue-Eyed, Brown-Eyed Experiment. And basically on her website, janeelliott.com, she describes in general that this exercise labels participants as superior or inferior beings to give people a taste of what it's like to be a minority. And specifically with her class, on day one, she said, okay, children with blue eyes, you're superior. Children with brown eyes, you're inferior. And the next day they switched, so all the children got a taste of both sides. But what she said was, if you're superior, you're smarter, teachers love you better, you get extra time at recess. If you're inferior, you're dumb, teachers don't like you, you're not allowed to touch the jungle gym at recess, you're not allowed to have seconds at lunch, things like that. So it really set these kids up to feel being treated differently based on something that can't have any effect on their eye color. So now I'm going to show you a clip from the documentary.
Yesterday, I told you that brown-eyed people aren't as good as blue-eyed people. That wasn't true. I lied to you yesterday. The truth is that brown-eyed people are better than blue-eyed people. Russell, where are your glasses? I forgot. You forgot them. What color are your eyes? Blue. Susan Ginder has brown eyes. She didn't forget her glasses. Russell Ring has blue eyes, and what about his glasses? He forgot them. Yesterday we were...
So, what she says in another clip of this movie is that within 10-15 minutes she saw an immediate change in their behavior from the first day and the second day. If they were on the superior side, they were smarter, they were finishing tests quicker, they had more energy and confidence, and the opposite on the inferior side. And she also saw their behavior toward each other change completely. They acted differently, they made fun of each other, based on something that had been the same the entire time, but now she had defined them as inferior and superior. So now you get an idea how the experiment went. I'll talk to you more about what's going on currently. This is a more recent picture of Jane Elliott. After teaching in schools, she has been giving diversity training seminars internationally. I mean, she's been all over. People have invited her to give these trainings. And I have a quote from Front Page Magazine that says, she's been on the Oprah Winfrey Show 5 times. She's led diversity trainings for companies such as General Electric, Exxon, AT&T. She's worked with the Department of Education and the U.S. Navy, and she's lectured at over 350 colleges and universities. So this woman is going all over the place, Germany, Australia, Canada, everywhere you can think of, and changing people's lives. And there's testimony of people from every different background, race, ethnicity, language, whatever you can think of, that are all having that she's having a positive influence on them. Lastly, I'd like to share with you a specific testimony of a time that she affected somebody's life. And in a PBS interview, she recalls a time when she was in Germany, and this woman, who was on the superior end of the game, said, you know what, let's not do this. This is dumb. You can appeal to my reasons. Of course, we know discrimination is bad, but you won't get me emotionally. And the group voted and decided to go ahead and do the game. And at the end of it, she says, with tears running down her face, that woman said, I'm so glad I lost that vote. I learned so much by going through this exercise. I could never have learned from listening to you talk what I learned from that experience. So again, that's just one of many different testimonies that say she had a positive effect on them. So lastly, I want to show you one more clip of when she worked with adults.
The word reflects badly. All right, now how would one call you by your name if you don't?
When you say you three,
Then what should you do?
please I know who my parents are, man.
Is she being rude?
Yes,
Is she being inconsiderate?
very,
Is she being uncooperative?
very,
Is she being insulting?
yes,
Are those the things that we accuse blue-eyed people of being?
yes,
Is she proving that we're right?
yes.
Does anyone have any comments to make at this point?
Do you feel that there are important blue-eyed people?
There are exceptions to every rule.
And what are those exceptions?
There are few important blue-eyed people.
So as you can see, they're wearing those little collars. She puts those on to clue everyone in that those are the inferior people. So now, I just want to summarize by saying that Jane Elliott was just a teacher in Iowa with a passion for anti-racism, and she wanted to spread that passion to her students, and she's done that tenfold internationally, working with anyone you could possibly imagine with her brown and blue-eyed experiment. Now that you're familiar with The Class Divided, I hope that you have some interest in watching the film or reading the book so you can be affected by her experiment. Thank you.
So Esther, what did you think?
I thought that Rachel gave her speech with a lot of enthusiasm and showed genuine personal attention to the topic. And she spoke really clearly and workings. And Susan said she could have done something for her speech. She could have given the listeners a little more time to absorb what she was speaking. It was a little bit rushed, and the transitions did, when she jumped from the next transition to the next topic, it was a little hard to follow where she was going, but overall I thought it was a very clear and good speech. Oh, sorry, Taylor.
That's okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I like the opening with the Indian prayer and the experiment being nicely introduced and kind of connected to each other. There's a very good explanation of what the subject is as a setup, and your thesis, I think, is also set up pretty well. And there's an excellent preview. I think in the body of the speech it got a little off because I was expecting to hear more about the first experiment and the results and the documentary that you saw being done, and it ended up being a lot more about the teacher in the second half of the speech, which seemed like a little bit of a shift. And it was a little unclear to me until partway through that second clip where you were dealing with the adults that she continues to use this experiment in her training, I think I would like a little bit more detail about how the experiment works. I know that it appears to have a dramatic effect and illustrates the point pretty well, but I think we need some details of examples or incidents or events that show us how people